Hello, hello. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. How are we? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to From Legacy to Next Gen. I'm your host, Cameron Ivy, and I'm alongside some pretty cool people, pretty knowledgeable people. I like to call them my friend. Friends, plural. I got Jake Ottenwaelder here, as well as Safaa Darwish. Thank you both for coming. Excited to have you on.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
for
me.
having us.
Awesome. How are we doing this morning? Everything good? Get our coffee in?
Oh yeah, it's time for the iced coffee. This is the place to be having it too.
I got mine for sure. So real quick, if anybody doesn't know Jake or Safaa, Jake, if you want to go ahead and just give a little background of yourself, and then we'll move on to Safaa and then do some fun facts and jump into this.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey everybody. My name is Jake. I am a principal privacy engineer at Integrative Privacy. We offer white labeled and fractional privacy engineering services to a variety of organizations and try to develop and improve a holistic approach to privacy within our customers.
Great. And I'm Safaa Darwish, program manager for customer privacy operations over here at Transcend. I get to work with doing implementations of customers who are coming off of legacy tools and are looking for automation and to really take their privacy operations to the next level and get rid of redundancies. So prior to Transcend, I was actually a customer of Transcend, got to do the full implementation, loved it, completely drank the Kool-Aid, and now I'm here. And after having done all of our main product implementations myself as a customer, now I get to enjoy working with customers every day in implementing their own privacy programs with Transcend.
Awesome. Love it. So let's go ahead and go over some fun facts real quick. All right. So I thought this was interesting. Apparently, 1 in 4 Americans are asked to agree to a privacy policy every single day. Doesn't it seem low? Shouldn't it be more than that?
I feel like that means that you're going to a new site to agree to a privacy policy, right? So like, I don't know. It seems low, but when you think about like, I guess I'm just a creature of habit. I don't see privacy policy and notices that much because maybe they just don't present it that often. But that is interesting.
So you get presented with a privacy policy, and it's not like a consent banner or any like consent specific language. It's just the privacy policy.
I guess.
I have many questions here.
Yeah, I wonder because my mind goes to like everybody's going on some kind of website almost every single day, I'm sure. Where and usually most companies. I wonder if that's saying that not all companies are actually providing an actual privacy policy as much as we would expect, at least.
Yeah, that's interesting. 1 in 4. Hey.
1 in 4. All right.
Consent banners where it's at.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to have them pop up in front of folks too in the US.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, what was that? Americans. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely US only. I wonder what that would be for across the pond. But
anyone not US, you can comment thoughts here.
All right, let's go ahead and dig into why we're here. So, talking about laying the foundation, biggest thing we're going to be honing in on today is data mapping, and a lot of the challenges with legacy solutions, which struggle to meet those modern expectations. Let's kind of talk about the flexibility of things. Jake, I'll start with you. Can you kind of dig into why legacy solutions often lack that flexibility that's kind of needed to adapt to a modern data architecture?
Yeah, so I've worked on and helped implement number of different kind of data mapping tools, and I think there's a wide breadth of like technology that people can manage and implement within their organization, and each one has kind of different uh, technical kind of opportunities with it, whether you're doing a Snowflake database or Redshift or just Parquet tables in like a um, S3 buckets, right? They have from the technology and from the business standpoint, they have like very specific requirements to meet when developing their technology stack. And as we look at privacy or when we look at data mapping, we want to be an enabler and not a like hindrance for the business. And so historic or legacy tools might not have the same breadth of availability, but also data mapping in general is a very like manual process. And so if you unless you have a tool that really helps elevate or support that, most legacy tools just when it comes to data mapping is just a glorified kind of spreadsheet. And that takes a lot of effort from your team to maintain that.
Yeah, especially because talking about companies that probably have a lot of sensitive data on spreadsheets,
Yep.
literally. That's a good point. So Safaa, what do you think are some specific like examples of how legacy systems how they've created challenges for businesses? What do you think some of those may be to add on to Jake's points?
Yeah, so definitely we see different legacy systems that folks are moving off of every day at Transcend, and helping folks move onto the Transcend platform for data mapping in particular. I would say not even necessarily like diving into the specific tool we're talking about. All of these legacy tools that the vast majority that we see folks migrating off of are not truly automated. They're kind of like a glorified spreadsheet in a lot of ways. And when you're talking about large companies or fast moving startups or your Fortune 500s, really backing anything up into a table, that's Web 1.0. I mean, that's in the past. Like it's time to start being able to automate some of this. And I think like the big piece here is that if it's truly automated, you shouldn't have to have one person or two people or a team of folks coming in and actually adding data into your data map. Now, I think that maybe Jake and I could get into a little bit about like what is a data map and what's the definition of a data map. And I think that there's maybe slightly differing opinions about what should a data map look like ideally. But really, for me, if I see someone coming off a legacy system, and I see this all the time, they don't know where the data is, and they don't know how to find out easily what the data is. Just that's not automated, and that's not okay for anyone's data map, especially if you have to have a person who's actually going in manually and grabbing things or reviewing things. It's not going to stay up to date, and you're going to have to have a team. If for any sizable business, you're going to have a team working to update that data map manually.
That's a lot of resources. So let's talk about like the limitations that kind of rolls into it. Jake, what do you think some of the key features, what are typically missing from legacy data management solutions that are essential for today for our modern data privacy needs?
Yeah, I think I mean Safa's I think we're all speaking the same language where it requires a lot of extensibility when it comes to the data, making sure that we have the various fields and information that's required to complete the data map. But also I think a big key of this is like now the so what, right? I meet a lot of customers who are like, I want a data map. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what are you going to do with it? Like what's the end goal, or like, what is this actually feed into? And I think that having that conversation is really important, because that will change what the technology is that we're doing, how we're going to go about kind of managing this. Is this required for like a sales process, or is this required for compliance reasons, or how are we going to leverage the data from this data map, or the output of this? I think that's can be a big constraint, because when you look at creating like auxiliary deliverables off of that, like the ROPAs or your PIAs, DPIAs, all of those require different inputs and different information about the data that you would need to consider in a data map. And unless you like have had that forethought, most of the legacy tools are not going to include that, and then you're back to having to go back and rediscover that information, and either try to store it in that legacy tool, or a different location.
That's good points. Safaa, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Jake. Like actually establishing goals when folks first come to you, that's huge for a data map. And sometimes folks will come, they're like, I know I need to have a data map. Why? What's the goal? What's your timeline? That a lot of times it's really important. We do this at Transcend too, where we do sit down with customers and we're like, okay, do we have goals and outcomes? If there's not, KPIs or solid goals that we're trying to reach, we work with the customer to come up with those, because from experience too, that's super important. Like you can't have we want to bring value. At the end of the day, the privacy team is still trying to not only protect the business, but you're trying to move the business forward at the same time, for sure. The thing with data maps too is that they can be very overwhelming, for sure. It's a lot of data, especially when you're talking about data points. So folks, I think a lot of folks tend to get a bit overwhelmed. And there's two places that I really see, huge, pitfalls here. Definitely not having solidified goals. And I think a lot of times in US based is a little bit more difficult too, because we're not in like that mindset of like, I need my TIAs, my PIAs, my DPIAs. And there's like this set ROPA that I have a reference for. We're a bit more spread out, and there's a lot of legislation that we have to kind of keep up with, and bring it all together to decide what's going to be best for the business and what's going to be best for your organization. And I think definitely having those goals super important. The other piece to this is to don't have someone going in and doing this manually. That's old. That's old hat. We're done with that. You need to be able to kind of, having silo discovery, which is what we do, where you have a plugin and you can go in and you scan, you actually bring in systems, not having someone come in and typing in, pecking on the keyboard, all their SaaS tools. No, we want to make sure that we're actually scanning, we're bringing those in, and that's also going to be automated so that you also have an updated data map. The updated part is huge. Half of success is enough, right? But having a data map, really, you just need to know. I think about, okay, data is like, it flows like water, right? We know data flows like water. If you send, rubber duckies out into a river, and you just need to track them, you don't necessarily know what they all look like, but you need to know where they are and approximately what they are. So rubber ducky, okay, great. So just knowing where those rubber ducks are living and how they're flowing, having that updated, that's really your first kind of huge step, maybe bound towards getting into compliance.
That's a good point. Oh, sorry, Jake. I was just going to make a crack joke. I struggle with the US map in general, and to go to not have something that automates actual sensitive data into a map for you. Crucial. Go ahead, Jake. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, great sound bites. I mean, I love the rubber ducky analogy. Wasn't there like some like scientific thing where it was like a quark or something, like the really small particles in atoms or something. You can either tell like where it is at a point in time, or you can tell where it's going. You can't get like both pieces of information. And I think that's like, I mean, I love your analogy with like the running water and stuff, because it's very similar to that. You can see at a point in time, okay, this is what data was going on, but maybe you don't get like the full picture of it, or you either aren't going to be able to update it over time. And I think the other piece that I wanted to touch on is that I find a lot of implementation actually can get more expensive when you try to factor in like all the individual like US states, right? Like it takes a lot longer to comply with all the different like US states down to the T versus being able to just do a broad like almost privacy as a human right approach, where you can take the least common denominator in a lot of these cases is GDPR, and just make sure that you build your solutions to kind of exist in that realm. And that would be just, yeah, I don't know, just those were thoughts that came up, but yeah, great idea, Safaa.
I agree.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, so we'll touch on automation a little bit more in depth later too, and especially when we go into the product. But talking about like some security vulnerabilities that go along with this, I guess I'll start with you, Jake. How do gaps in legacy systems create security vulnerabilities? What are some of the potential risks that people should look out for?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good time to kind of, I as an engineer kind of want to take a step back, and I know we were talking about like setting goals and stuff. Let's also, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with like what data mapping is, right? Because I think Transcend has a great tool when it comes to data mapping. I think Safaa mentioned like you connect your SaaS tools and you can connect your data silos. When it comes to that element of it, a lot of the legacy tools, when they are advertising data mapping or live data mapping, that's not like Transcend is operating in a different space than what they're talking about, right? We have to look at like not only data mapping but also like data discovery. You have to look at data classification. You have to look at kind of automating those elements of creating not only a map but also like an inventory. And then we look at like the new concepts around data provenance and stuff. There are a lot of different data blank words that can be really confusing, and at the end of the day, I think an organization's goal should be identify or having an automated tool to discover the data within their environment, because the discovery allows you to create this kind of quasi privacy operations center, like a security operations center, where you can kind of monitor your environment. That's where data discovery really is very valuable. And once you have that data discovery, you can then create the data map that can be your like central source of truth, and from that generate ROPAs and all these other kind of fun tools outside of that. But I think all of this from a security and compliance standpoint is a really big question mark around what options are you allowing a third party to kind of come in and access this kind of data. And the biggest key for me that I look at is trying to reduce one. Personally, I try to reduce AI models when it comes to this kind of information. AI models are notoriously not great to understand kind of what data is coming in, out, and what's being tracked. And then I also want to focus on like having as much processing done in-house as possible. So when we talk about like the silo discovery and the different features that are within, I believe, the Sombra module that Transcend offers, that's a module that lives in your environment. So the more processing that can be done inside your environment, the less data is flowing outside of it. Yeah, Safaa talked a lot.
On the AI machine or
Yeah.
AI topic, were you kind of referring to, does that fall kind of into the ML as well, machine learning?
Machine learning is different. Machine learning is generally more of closed model options, and when we look at machine learning for data classification is usually where machine learning, because the only like machine learning when it comes through is like I said, a very like strict algorithm. And so it is also traditionally not very good at doing data classification. I'm speaking in broad terms, but so I'm not as concerned about machine learning as long as it's not like a continuous learning model. But yeah, I'm more concerned about full like attaching an LLM or sending all of your data to OpenAI to classify it. That would be a privacy concern as well. I think it's a good mix. It needs to be a good mix of both technical like automation support and kind of manual review. And I think that's the sweet spot that I know at least Transcend has hit as well.
Yeah. So Safaa, to that same point, working with customers, transitioning from legacy tools and stuff, what can companies that are trying to transition from using that legacy solution, that manual solution, to something like Transcend, what can you give in terms of some measures or things to kind of plan out for that transition to something like Transcend?
Yeah, so when folks first come and say you're migrating off of a legacy tool that you really didn't get much automation out of, number one piece is make sure that you're doing your silo discovery. That's just number one. That's day one. With Transcend, it hardly takes any time. I think that for me, I got it up. Silo discovery was really fast. It was within the first week, like personally. But it's also now I've started doing that with customers as well too. Is silo discovery is number one. One of the things that I really appreciate about Transcend is the way it's been designed too. Is like we will never inject directly into your data inventory. That's not something we do, and that as like a compliance team, like you don't want necessarily to have a tool, a third-party tool, which might be amazing and great to be injecting directly into your data inventory, into your data map. So what we do is we do that silo discovery, and then we'll have a session you kind of run through what did we discover here within your cloud platforms or within your IDP, for example. Once you've added what you want to your data inventory and you've weeded out the garbage, or you find some stuff that you're like, why is that sitting up there? Then you can go back to your IT team, your infra team to discuss it. To me, you have a high level blueprint of your tech stack, of what lives within your org. It's very important, like one-stop shop in order to be able to generate a ROPA too. So if you're looking to get up and running and be able to generate a record of processing activities or some other type of a data report that you would need to pull down quickly, that's a great way to do it, even before you start stepping in and looking at, all right, what kind of data points do I have in my warehouses? But the fact that just having your silo discovery set up, you set it and you forget it, basically. There's definitely the piece where you would go in, you just check, like, do I want to have this in my data inventory? I can add it. I think that's a huge piece, and it gives you control. And it gives you control. It also sets a good schedule for your team too, that I think it's super valuable, just because you can generate data reports and ROPAs because you have all of that information within your data inventory. If you want to dive deeper and take a depth approach to understand, really get down the nitty gritty of like, all right, what data points live where within my first party systems or my data warehouse, et cetera, that would go into the content classification piece. And I think it's a heavier lift, just because you're looking at all the information that you get pulled in and you get pulled in front of you automatically. You have a lot of stuff there. We do classifications automatically as well, though we'll never set a hard classification. So we'll still need to make sure that you understand what you would prefer to add to the data inventory versus not. I think that though, just being able to have your silo discovery and then be able to kind of dive deep afterwards, after you've generated your record of processing activity, and then you can start really doing a deep dive into like the tagging world of like looking at, all right, what is Transcend pulling back for me? What information has Transcend discovered? Transcend thinks that it's found health data in this particular database within this warehouse. all right, well, let's make a plan. And we do this with customers too. It's like, let's make a plan about like, what do we actually want to look at? And what are we going to kind of just, let it sit there and know that it's there for if and when we need it to review.
Yeah, that's great. So to that same point, I know you kind of touched on it. Both of you have touched on it a little bit, but for the viewers, can we dig into a little bit of the differences between what is data mapping, what is data classification, data discovery, the whole catalog. Let's kind of like touch on that a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Data mapping is all those things.
Yeah, so I think first off is the data discovery piece, right? So understanding where your data is and what all is there. That's just like trying to discover, and that will generally require some agent, or whether it's a serverless agent or some scanning agent into your environment to get a better understanding. And that's that data discovery part, is like, well, what all is here. We get into a data catalog, I think, is next, where really that I think is historically a very like manual kind of process. When I've run through like a PIA, I grab the PIA and then I go into the enterprise relational database, relational diagram, and start looking at like, okay, this table is connected to this value, and trying to pull together all the different data elements that are going to be affected by this service. And so by pulling in all those elements, I start to create this data catalog. After that, the next step would be kind of the data mapping. So like combining a lot of that data and each of those different data points to better understand like what is the entire system of data, the body of data, this big river that we have, where are all the little ducks going, what are they doing, kind of what's going on. And then we can get into the data classification, which is like, okay, we're going to tag all that data. I'm just copying Safaa's homework at this point, but yeah, that's where you kind of get into all those areas. So as I kind of mentioned, unless you have a data discovery element that's automating a lot of this, there's no great way to actually implement this. And what I've seen, at least in legacy tools, is that in a lot of cases, what they call data mapping is more of just a glorified either data catalog or a system inventory. And that's where you get a lot of, really disappointing to kind of see. And that's where you have to almost get away from the marketing language, so to speak, and just focus on, I need a tool that does this, and focus on that, and don't just buy based on what they're telling you this certain thing is called.
I feel physically attacked right now with the marketing comment, but I'm just kidding. Do you have anything that you wanted to add there?
Yeah, completely agree with what Jake is saying here. Cataloging. Sorry, I came off of a legacy tool when I was a customer, like before Transcend. I had another tool, and the data mapping piece to that was, it was a data catalog. It was like a glorified Excel spreadsheet, in my opinion. Great, like that's kind of the old way that folks would do it. But it was not maintainable for a privacy team and a lot of privacy teams are not going to be very large. And even if they are a larger team, the larger the team, the larger the business probably, right? So there's not the time to go in and, all right, you have the set of tags. All right, now I'm going to go in and set okay, no, we need to make sure that we're updating your data inventory, your data map, and there is some automation to that. So even if you were to step away from it and you were to focus on another portion of the compliance piece within your data privacy operations, you would still have a data map, right? You still have all that information there. It needs to have that, legal review of like, all right, let me come in and just check it out, which is also something that I've heard customers saying too, and that I loved as well too, is that, this is something that if you need legal counsel to come in, maybe their outside counsel or maybe they're another counsel on the team, that you need them to come in and just review silos. You can come into or data assets. You can come into Transcend and tell, all right, you can review this on your own time. And that's a huge piece. The fact that that's actually easy enough for them to go in, maybe make a search, or maybe they already know, maybe you've assigned them the systems to review. That's a huge piece. And you're not dealing in an interface. You're not dealing in like a spreadsheet situation where maybe you can get lost pretty easily there. I think that, I don't know if my screen is sharing here. I can't quite tell.
Oh, sure.
Oh, there we go. So when I talk about data inventory here, this is what we're referring to. So basically I look at this and I'm like, this is my data map. This is my high level data map here. Right now I'm looking at all the data silos. That's like, kind of high level assets. What third parties do I have? What first party services do I have here? What cloud services do I have? This is really capturing everything that I know is within my tech stack. And then I have the ability as a privacy team to come in and review whatever information has been pulled back, and also add new fields in or add new information as I needed to within my data inventory. And this is after we've taken it from our silo discovery. Down here, we've discovered all of these different systems. We pulled back all of this information that we found maybe by discovering from plugging into Segment, for example. Great example here. And we plugged into Segment, we scanned this. This is, by the way, very instantaneous gratification. We start pulling in silos immediately, pretty much once that plugin starts to run. And then really what it takes is come into here and decide, do I actually want to add all of this into my data inventory? Or should I be discussing with the team when I see that there are a bunch of maybe like repeat tools or repeat silos, because that definitely happens. I mean, it's also a really great way to clean up your tech stack too, when you're noticing a bunch of repeats. But once you've decided what you want to add into your data inventory, bam, you can start generating ROPAs. And we do have a data reports tool as well. You can start exporting, chop it, lift it, shift it. It's really malleable. And that's part of why I went with Transcend as a customer. I see now customers of Transcend doing this too, is the fact that it's so flexible and that you can really, it's very flexible and also integrates with the rest of the tools that we have as well. There's no reason not to automate this. The more you can set it and forget it on a privacy team, I think that's the way to go. And also not only, and I'm not saying like set it and walk away, never look at it again. I'm absolutely not saying that. I'm saying you have such a wealth of information at your fingertips that can be used across the business, and that will not require someone to pull up an Excel spreadsheet and kind of do like a column search. You have it right here. And this is very accessible, especially cross-functionally. Whenever you're working maybe with the business team, perhaps there's a business use case where your particular company is wanting to engage in data sales. This is a great way to start here, and looking at what kind of data points do we have, where are we storing consent, et cetera, and being able to work cross-functionally between teams as well.
Love that. What when someone's coming into Transcend, or you're trying to go through that process, what are some things that you can kind of tell those people, like, because that one comment is always going to be, well, I don't want to put the work in to actually have these automated processes in place. It takes time. How long of a process is that when doing something like that with the data mapping in Transcend? For
like silo discovery or adding to that data inventory?
Yeah.
Oh, you can have this up the first day, really, for the data inventory piece of it. If you want to add structure discovery, you want to add data points, I would definitely, like Jake was mentioning, the Sombra portion of this, the fact that we do have Sombra, which is the zero trust security gateway. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that I decided to go with Transcend at my prior org as well too is because that does exist. So Transcend will never actually connect if you set up Sombra on-prem within your for your organization. Transcend will never connect to your databases over public TLS. Like that's huge. Like we don't want to connect directly to your database without that zero trust security gateway on premise to you as well. so that we don't have access to your data there. So we strongly encourage anybody to make sure like they set that up. It's just another level of security. Another layer of security, I think that we were talking about security just a little bit earlier, Cameron, you brought it up. So I'm pretty sure like Lori Baker said this. Sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth if you did not say this, but
Sorry, Laura. Say allegedly, and you'll be good.
Yeah, so I might just be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure she said this here, but also not putting words in folks' mouths. But on the Venn diagram of privacy and security, like security sits within privacy, and having just one other layer of security just goes along with your privacy operations. And it's definitely something that I think that we all trying to strive for, including for data mapping.
Yeah, I mean, piggybacking off, I mean, when you look at just adoption of technology, right? I think, unfortunately, or at least in a lot of organizations that I've worked with, security is very well ingrained, and I think a lot of organizations trust security, and security teams. When it comes to privacy, I think we're still relatively new, and I think it's important to recognize that you do need to. If the security team is the people is the team that is being listened to within the room, making sure that whatever tool that you select is also going to be like beneficial or signed off on by the security team, is really helpful. And so when I think a lot of the procedures that Transcend has put in place makes it a lot easier for security teams to sign off and be comfortable with the level of access and information.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, I mean, security teams utilize the data mapping for Transcend too. Like, this is not privacy specific. This is not only for privacy compliance teams or legal teams. This is for definitely built with security in mind as well, and really definitely to be cross-functional, because at the end of the day, privacy is extraordinarily cross-functional. It hits every piece of the business. If you can't describe what your issues are or what you're looking to do to your cross-functional partner, you're bad luck. And being able to describe what your concerns are or what you're trying to build out, and actually having a good visual and being able to show what your concerns are, that's the first step. I mean, data visualization is just absolutely cannot be forgotten here, for sure. But we're seeing definitely security teams will utilize the data mapping piece of it too, because the automated piece of it is huge. And the fact that you can go in and connect or utilize a Terraform provider if you have AWS in order to connect to all of those different buckets, that saves a lot of time. And cross-functionally, hey, you know what? Sharing a budget here is great. Like security and privacy, if you are going to be utilizing the same data map, I mean, that's great. Yeah, so.
Yeah, to that point, as cheesy as it is, there's a saying out there: you can have security without privacy, but you can't have privacy without security. So we're basically the meatballs to the spaghetti and the jelly to the peanut butter, or peanut butter to the jelly, I guess. Anyone? Crickets?
Works.
But
I don't know how you picked like which one to be which, but I'll let you.
if you're feeling noodly, or if you're feeling
Yeah.
Anyways, do we
want
having
your spaghetti and meatballs just dry? Like there's no sauce on it? Like what are you talking about?
That's true. Sorry if there's any Italians listening. I probably just made you cringe without talking about sauce.
Yeah, don't worry. Cam only cuts all of his spaghetti in half before he boils it. There you go.
Yeah, that's the unwritten rule to get that. Okay, so Jake, do you want to touch a little bit on any of the want-to-haves around metadata and sample data scans before we move on to a little bit more of the product?
Yeah, so I think we touched on it. I think Transcend shows a great implementation of like metadata scanning and stuff. So I think what's important to kind of consider, or when you look at what the next stage of it is, sometimes data mapping can also be an avenue for data like anonymization or data de-identification. And so there are different elements that like can continue to kind of improve that area. I think for the most part, metadata scanning is going to be the most secure and best opportunity for a lot of organizations who need to develop this ROPA and need to develop it pretty quickly. Once you get into like sample data scanning, that helps a lot more with data classification or looking at data leakage as well. Like if we have a column that is supposed to include somebody's phone number, but it might actually just be like a social security number or some other example, like free text forms and stuff like that. That's where you can get a better understanding as to like maybe what data is being leaked or not correctly input. And that's where like maybe a sample data scan might help. And I would love, as Transcend continues to kind of develop, I think there is opportunity for them to continue to operate into or work into like this sample data area where you can have better visibility, or that does give a lot of more visibility and a lot more practical visibility. But again, for it opens up a lot more security risk as well. And maybe especially just for a ROPA, you don't need sample data scanning. That just really helps when you look at data anonymization or data de-identification processes.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like the breadth and depth approach to the ROPA for sure. But like Jake said, when you're first coming in to get your record processing activity, aligned and have it up and updating by itself, you need just like that 10,000 foot view. And then from there, once you have that scanning and you have that structured scan where you're going in, you're actually sampling the data points that live within those columns and databases and warehouses. From there, you can really do a deep dive and actually take a look. And the great thing is too, like you're always going to have to, assign your own data categories or assign your own purposes of processing that might be very specific to your organization. And being able to do that, but also being able to take those and assign them, break it down by the data categories that you're the most concerned about. I think that's huge. And that actually gives more focus to your team when you're deciding, okay, what should we go in and attack right now? We're concerned about PHI. We're concerned about sensitive data categories. I mean, Maryland's coming on. You can't sell sensitive data, even if you have, there's no consent for that now, apparently, which is a whole other, I think, layer of that's pretty interesting. That's all of that can be tagged and can also be just automated within Transcend as well, so that it can start doing that tagging and giving you different confidence levels about what we think that particular data point is. But there's definitely that depth approach. And when you are ready to do that deep dive and be able to do that tagging, I mean, it's there for you. And I think that's a huge piece too, because you can you attack the elephant. Like, don't do everything in one day. Rome was not built in one day. Don't try to go in and tag everything all at once. Compliance is completely a story. And just being able to know, first of all, where's your rubber duckies? Great, I have my ROPA. And then, being able to actually follow along those rubber duckies and like, all right, let's tag these guys and we can, follow the flow of the river and figure out where they're going. That's a whole, that's your next level within your compliance and privacy operations, I think. And Transcend does a great job at automating that. Other piece to this too is like, what we were chatting about, like Transcend is really great at automating, but also really great at connecting tools together that we have within the instance as well. So maybe if I can share screen again real quick. The one thing that I found really personally helpful and that I've seen other customers utilize as well too is that anything that's like a SQL database or anything that's a structured database that has a bunch of tables, Transcend can prepare statements, and then you can decide whether or not you want to utilize the statement that Transcend prepares for data subject requests. So if you're an admin and you're a privacy program manager, you're working with legal, you're working with engineering, you're working with security, you have the power to go in and create prepared statements. as an admin. Again, you can scope down, so not everyone can do this, but you can create basically prepared statements, and that just that helps you a lot with cutting out time for having to create prepared SQL statements, or at least you can review what Transcend is giving to you, and you can go back and review it with your engineering team and make sure that you're all aligned, that this in fact is fine to be part of an access request. This data is fine, in fact, to be part of a deletion request or an opt-out request, what have you. But this is majorly helpful, because even if you have yourself a prepared SQL statement and you want to be able to go delete data or access data, you can do that just from within Transcend, and you do it from within your data map. So this is just the next step to that, the way it integrates. You absolutely don't have to do it this way, but it's there. And being able to just come in here, one-stop shop. All right, I reviewed these data points and I know that I want to delete these emails, phone numbers. Great. I can come in here and either generate a SQL statement from Transcend, or I can put in my own. That's a huge time saver. Also, you reviewed the data, you know what's there. You can show it cross-functionally to your other teams. I'd say that's a huge time saver. So.
Yeah, huge time saver. Most of my implementations when I've worked not with Transcend, which was unfortunate, is that I had to go in and you're coding each of these statements yourself, and you're putting it into the like Terraform implementation, and then that needs to go through your like Jenkins deployment cycle and testing and all this other stuff. Like this is, you just have it right in a UI browser, which is a lot easier to manage and leverage, update, like monitor than having to go through that entire process. So yeah, definitely really, really cool.
Awesome. Anything else that we want to add here when it comes to, I know we kind of been jumping around, but anything around the risk and compliance part of things while we're here before the next phase?
Yeah, the last piece I wanted to say was talking about, I mean, I think this will flow well into kind of this demo and reviewing stuff. Is everything within Transcend was built like technology first and all within the same in-house kind of structure. And as an engineer and as somebody who has looked at, or I've played around in my own kind of personal implementation or little personal projects and stuff outside of work, like trying to connect different open source packages together, nothing's gonna work like just as well, or nothing's ever going to work just as well as like having everything in-house and built in under one roof. I think that's the main market that like Apple has cornered as well, this like premium ecosystem that is all its own closed off group, versus my Windows computer shuts down on itself every day because I tried to build my own computer and Windows just doesn't ever work. So I think that's like looking at how Transcend has done it, and there are other competitors within the space who have had 9-10 different acquisitions over the past couple years, acquiring different like functionality for their tools, but it's not going to have that same interoperability that Transcend offers, where you looked at the data map, and in the data map and in the data catalog or data inventory has the data points and data endpoints for data deletion. And so that way you can connect all of these different tools together, and a lot of those data points that were in your data inventory also were probably captured from like DSR SaaS connections, or it could have been captured in the systems captured within your consent manager, like air gap triage process. There's everything kind of works together, and it works together.
Love that. Anything you wanted to add there, Safaa?
Yeah, no, completely agree with what Jake is saying. It was really important to me as a customer, like personally, to have everything under one umbrella. Like the org I was at, we just gone through a bunch of mergers and acquisitions. We had all the major privacy regulations. Our businesses covered those, EU, California, etc. It was super important. I needed everything to be under one umbrella. My legacy tool did not do that. I honestly ran away. It did not do the job well on the best of days. And I really needed something that was automated. I could not be coming in here and constantly worrying about like adding a new tag or adding a new. I needed something that would actually be here. That if I had the time and I set times on specific days of the week to come in and see what information Transcend had brought back for me, it's there. Also, coming from a paralegal background as well, I worked as a paralegal for a number of years. I also worked at largest public law office as a data analyst for a short time as well too. The data that your legal team needs is for subpoenas or for or discovery requests. Mm-hmm. All of that's here. Working cross-functionally, Transcend does a great job integrating with itself for the DSARs, for consent, for data mapping, for silo discovery. We do a really great job at actually integrating, like Jake was saying, we're engineering-led organization too. But not only that, like we really focus on making sure that everything is within the UI as well, as much as possible. And the fact that a legal team is still having to go to HR, having to go to operations, then having to go to another HR for a subsidiary, just to be able to fulfill a subpoena, hours, weeks, that's not good. It's a money waste. It's a time suck. You don't need that. This was honestly like a huge time saver for just like the legal compliance piece. So if you're working cross-functionally with your legal team as well, a lot of times you'll become the person who they're going to be coming to you to help pull back data. If you have somebody who's like the manager or like the legal manager who needs to just be able to have like that high level overview, be able to do a search on what data exists within your HRIS or your CRM, this is where you're going to come. The majority of the data that you're going to need to be responding to these requests is probably going to be in Transcend. So this was also a great way that we could actually work cross-functionally with the legal team too, was actually being able to have folks be able to come in here, or at least like the designated paralegal who would be processing a subpoena or who would be processing a discovery request would be able to come in here. If they needed to go down to the data point level, they could do that. And if they needed to be able to just look at the silo level and decide what systems they needed to pull out of for a particular data subject in a legal request, that's all within here too. So I agreed. It integrates so well with itself for DSARs, but honestly, even if you didn't want to come in and necessarily review what Transcend has suggested as classifications for the data points that we've pulled back here, like you can see, there's a bunch of data points that we're giving as suggestions here for in terms of what data category this is. This is all right here. It's for when you need it. So you don't have to necessarily worry about going in and classifying or reviewing the classifications. So.
Awesome. Jake, is there anything that you wanted to add when it comes to, well, just to add on to what Safaa was saying, but also just around integration and importing manual data maps and things like that?
I mean, I think we've talked a lot about like kind of just a glorified spreadsheet, and I think it would be remiss if I didn't mention that this looks kind of like a spreadsheet. But I think that is valuable in a case where you at least will have an understanding, and you have past history. Like everybody knows how to work a spreadsheet, right? The glorified spreadsheets that I don't like are ones that don't have interconnections, that don't have a structured yet flexible UI. And I think that's where you get into like this weird mystical magical kind of area where like you have columns here, you have structure that gives you some at least direction to go on, but there's also a lot of like customization that you can put into here with process purposes or owners or categories, or like what columns to show and what visuals you want to see. All of like there's it's a very friendly kind of UI, but the background behind it, I think the big value that you get is those interconnections. And when we talk about it's just a glorified spreadsheet, is a lot of times more cumbersome than it is valuable, where you're not getting a lot of those interconnections and a lot of the inputs normally. And so I just wanted to call that out so we didn't look like hypocrites kind of thing, with just talking about what looks like a spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's a great call out too. I think that it looks like you said, like the intuitive UI that you've seen a spreadsheet before kind of a deal.
Yeah.
There's definitely the automation aspect of it too, where you're getting like those automatic like suggestions for classification of a data point, for a data category, and being able to kind of go in and also train those classifications too. So if you have a particular number, if you have something in specific that you want to make sure that Transcend is picking up with a high confidence level, you can also do some training there too. So it's not like the legacy tools that I've seen or the ones I've used is like, it's literally like a spreadsheet, and like you get a set of like tags maybe, and you go in, you start tagging. But there's no like automation piece where you would have the tool like make a strong suggestion and give you like a strong confidence whether or not that category is in fact what it is. And Transcend does fill in that gap, which is huge when you don't have time to go in and start being like, okay, here's my tags. All right, I'm gonna just go in and like kind of drag and drop or like type it in. And it saves you a lot of time for just being able to do like a search.
Even just doing bulk edits. I know Transcend offers bulk edits. Let's just like we could just stick with that. Like that's super helpful. I've had to go through like each specific system, and then you have to click into that system, then you have to change the value, then you have to save it, then you have to exit. The workflow is also a really big piece of this too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're coming close up on time. Is there anything else, Safaa or Jake, that you wanted to kind of dig into while we have the product up? Anything else that we want to touch on?
No, I think it speaks
know
for
where your
itself.
rubber duckies are?
Yeah. I love the rubber ducky. I think Transcend should definitely do some marketing around rubber duckies now. I think that would be a good little mascot for the company, but I will definitely be using that in the future as well.
Cameron, are you taking notes? Yeah.
You better. Well, you heard it here first, so that credit goes to Safaa. But both of you, thank you so much for the time today. If anybody does have any questions that are watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or through StreamYard, please send them our way. Happy to answer those later on. You can reach out to me, Safaa, Jake. We're happy to answer any questions you have. And thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks all.